Ladies, I am afraid I have some bad news. You know that dream every young girl has of Prince Charming, the handsome man in shining armor, riding a white horse to save you from dragons. Forget him, because that handsome man probably hasn't bathed in months, and the inside of that shiny armor, unfortunately, it does not smell like lavender. On the contrary, it is a bit stuffy. Today we stop using history for our romantic fantasies. We are going to talk about the smell, tax evasion, and yes, the famous diaper rash. First, let's clear up this lover boy image. Knights were warriors, but let's not romanticize them too much. Let me repeat, ladies, those knights were not fighting for your heart. They were fighting for money. Let's look at the conditions of the time. They were harsh. These men were the professional killers of the Middle Ages. Not everyone could fight. It was a job. And because they were professionals, they had rules. Their code of chivalry. Yes, they were gentlemen. But to whom? Only to each other. They didn't have to be polite to anyone outside their class, like a peasant. In fact, they could do whatever they wanted, and no one could stop them. So, unless you are a noble lady, a knight is not a hero to you. He is just an armored bully. Now, let's talk about hygiene, or rather, the absence of it. In medieval Europe, people had a distant relationship with water. The belief was that hot water would open your pores and let diseases enter your body. So, our knights preferred to be covered in a layer of filth to stay healthy. If a knight was approaching you, you would smell him long before you saw him. So, those passionate kissing scenes in the movies? I am giving you a clear warning. Do not kiss knights. It was no different than a biological weapon attack. I wouldn't recommend it. But, well, I suppose there is a lid for every pot. Now, let's get to that cool armor. Armor is basically a wearable oven, and also a prison. Moreover, that armor is a total nightmare. It is incredibly expensive. The horse costs a fortune. The armor costs a fortune. You needed a serious fortune to be a knight. Also, you can't just put that armor on by yourself. You absolutely need an army of servants behind you to dress you. So the servants dressed you. You are on the battlefield. The sun is high. The battle has been going on for 10 hours. And suddenly, nature calls. You need to use the bathroom. What do? Do you ask for a break? Excuse me, put down that axe. I need to pop behind a bush? No, you just go. Inside the suit. That is the moment romance dies. Imagine sweat, rust, and urine mixing in that metal box, combined with body heat. This toxic mixture caused history's deadliest diaper rash. Many brave knights didn't die by the sword, they died rotting alive, from infections caused by a dirty diaper. Does it still sound romantic? Furthermore, campaigns from the cold climate of Europe to the hot climate of the East destroyed these men. They cooked inside those metal cans in 40-degree heat. But the Eastern campaigns had one single benefit. The Crusaders noticed that the Muslims there washed frequently. They said, "Oh, look, water doesn't actually kill you." And thus, they began to bring cleaning habits and bath culture back to Europe. It's not over. Knights weren't just dirty. They were also history's first fashion victims. Look at the crotch area of their armor. Do you see that huge metal bulge? It's called a codpiece. Originally, it was for protection. But then, things got out of hand. It turned into a competition of who has the biggest one. Some walked around looking like they were hiding a melon in there. I guess knights were the first group of men in history to, well, compensate for something. And then there were the shoes. Poulaines. The toes were so long that they had to chain the tips of the shoes to their knees just to walk. Imagine an elite soldier tripping over his own feet while running into battle. What a magnificent sight. So, what were these men fighting? Dragons? If you look at medieval manuscripts, you will see that a knight's greatest enemy was giant snails. Yes, slugs. Why? No one knows. Maybe Sir Lancelot was afraid of slime. On the battlefield, they had some interesting customs. For instance, French knights were mounted cavalry, but the English were not. When the French met the English, they laughed. Are they fighting on foot? What a joke, they said. But the English had the last laugh. According to a common belief, the middle finger gesture we use today comes from English archers. During the Battle of Agincourt, the French threatened to cut off the fingers the English used to draw their bows. But when the English won, they raised their fingers in the air to mock them, saying, "Look, they are still here." So, when you show someone the middle finger in traffic, you are actually giving a 600-year-old history lesson. And then there was the misericord dagger. The name means mercy. Sounds nice, right? But they used this dagger to stab a fallen knight through the eye, because that was the only way to pierce the armor. A true example of chivalry, ending your pain by sticking a knife in your eye. The war is over. But what about love? Let's talk about winning a princess's heart at tournaments. Yes, those famous scenes exist. Knights knock each other off their horses, and the winner goes to the king's box for the finale. The princess next to the king stands up and throws her handkerchief to the knight. The knight takes the handkerchief, smells it, bows. This is called courtly love. But be careful. He cannot touch the princess. It is only to win her favor. However, it wasn't all that innocent. So many knights killed each other in these tournaments that eventually, both the kingdom and the church said enough is enough, and banned them. And then there is King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. We hear about King Arthur a lot. But looking at the evidence, such a person never existed. He is claimed to have lived in the 5th century. But in that case, we must say that the institution of knighthood didn't even exist back then. Merlin might be the most realistic character, but Arthur and his team are essentially a fairy tale marketed to us. Finally, gunpowder was invented, and that expensive armor turned into useless tin cans. You thought knighthood was over, right? No. The kings of England saw they were useless in war. So they said, let's just tax them. They started forcibly declaring rich people knights, because knights paid higher taxes. It got so weird that people started fleeing the country to avoid that great honor, to avoid becoming knights. No one wanted to pay that tax. Parliament eventually had to pass a law stating, no one can be forced to be a knight. So, that is the real story inside the shining armor. bad smells, skin burned by diaper rash, a fear of snails, and tax evasion. Cervantes was right. Don Quixote might have been crazy, but the windmills weren't so innocent either. History is not romantic. History is a bit itchy.